Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome back to another fine episode of Record Breakers. I'm PETEY RAVE, your man with no plan. Here with me, as always, is my quorum of friends, my record reviewer buddies. We got Brett.
There could be only one.
We got Drew.
Hey. How's it going, guys?
And we got Patrick.
Hello, party people.
And, of course, lastly, we have a special guest this week. We have none other than our friend Don Jaime himself, Geeko Suave. We got Tensorguy. Jaime, how you doing?
Hello. There can be only one.
Yes.
Give me
Yes. This week, of course, we're going to talk about music. This week, our guest is the provider of the music. Jaime, what album do you have for us this week?
Well, I bring like a dead bird to your stoop. It's a Kind of Magic from Queen, the very best of the world ever.
Yes. The unofficial soundtrack to Highlander. I have to ask you, Brett, what were your expectations coming into this album? I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Queen.
I'm familiar with Queen. I'm familiar with some Highlander. I'm familiar with all three of the Queen movies: Iron Eagle, Flash Gordon, and Highlander. But I had not listened to it all the way through. I was pretty familiar with all the tracks though, so this was kind of going back to something that is in my normal rotation.
Patrick, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I knew it was 80s Queen, which is to be differentiated from earlier Queen. Not that one is better than the other, but it's not like any of it's bad. It's all Queen. I'm a person who believes that there has never been and may never be a better frontman than Freddie Mercury. I don't know who it would be, and Brian May has the best guitar tone ever. So it's Queen. I'm in. Whatever it is, I'm in.
Drew, what were your expectations coming to this album?
Well, I kind of had a feeling of what I was getting into. I may have heard some Queen in my day. May have heard a lot of Queen in my day. It's kind of fucking Queen. So I knew there was going to be great, sweeping, amazing, grandiose guitar. I knew there was going to be vocals that were out of this world. I knew there was going to be some great fist-pumping arena rock and roll that I was going to get. And that was my expectations going in, knowing a little bit about Queen.
A little bit. Jaime, I have to ask you, well, what would be the themes and elements that make up this record that you would define this record?
I think, and I heard a little bit of the story about it. It kind of happened when they saw a small clip of the movie. Actually, they created the record. They created the songs for the movie, and then the movie Highlander. So there's a lot of I don't know, the loss of living on after your loved one has died, for example. There's a lot of fighting songs. There's a lot of triumphant themes of overcoming but it's you guys have to understand how revolutionary this was in the 80s, because Queen was to a kid from the 80s an old band. It was something that your older cousins or your uncles or whatever listened to in the 70s. So this kind of brought it to the present back then.
I have to ask, we'll go back to Brett. Brett, what would be the themes and elements that caught your attention about this record?
It's a Queen album, so it's gonna have big voice. Like the Freddie Mercury is the king of big voice. I mean, he not only does he have a big voice, but he has range, dynamics, and a personality. Like, there are very few frontmen that will have, like, across the world, Freddie Mercury is a thing that everyone knows. You know, the personality, the mustache, the checkerboard singlet, the everything. And you know, it's the benchmark for great frontmen. You know, that's it. But this was around the, you know, the waning years of having those guys around, making music. And Brian May finally had the technology to make the sounds that he wanted to easily. He wasn't having to use two tape delays and series. You know, this was a digitally recorded album. This was there was a lot of stereo effects, a lot of very tropey Queen stuff where you know, the songs would start off with one pace with a more arena rock feel, and then it would go into the 80s shred. But you know, you get the nice balance in the guitar of like holding sustain notes and then the boodle-deedle-doos and then back to the held sustain notes. It's, you know, it's very 80s. You get synthesizers, you get the echo drums, but you still get some of the best vocals that you can get anywhere off the shelf.
Patrick, what would be the themes and elements that caught your attention about the record?
So, like I said, this is 80s Queen, which means it's heavy on the synths. I'm more of a fan of Brian May ripping on a guitar than I am Brian May doing cool things with synths. But he does do cool things, and there's definitely some great guitar work hidden away in here. I think one of the things that I noticed about this, Roger Taylor, the drummer from Queen, is kind of underappreciated as drummers go, because he was just a drummer in a band with one of the best guitar players and the most recognizable frontmen. But he really holds down the sound of Queen, and he also is one of the main writers in the band. And I think it needs to be, said, there's a lot of really good drum work in here. It does sound like 80s drums, where it sounds like hydraulic heads played in an echo chamber, but it's done really well, and it sounds like a rock album, but with a lot of synths on top of it. And I feel like Queen never completely lost their arena rock roots in the best possible way. They always carried that energy and that flamboyance and sort of the grandiose nature of their music, even through their later years, where they were, trying to experiment with what was available to them.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be the themes and elements that caught your attention?
Well, to me, Queen, in general, is about the anthem. They make rock anthems. Whether it's the crazy, best driving song ever type of anthem, or you have your, more slower type songs, they always are at their best for me when they're creating a song that you can imagine, you just feel better because of. Whether it be because the music is uplifting or the lyrics are uplifting or whatever, you just can't help but feel better about the world and yourself and, what it is. The musicianship is great. Freddie's voice is ridiculous. It's out of this world. Queen is known because Freddie Mercury was the frontman. He is just... He is. I just looked up at my monitor. I hate you people. He is the frontman. Any frontman of your arena rock style band, in my opinion, needs to sort of mold themselves after Freddie. There's just something about him it commanded a stage, which begs the question, and I wanted to ask this to the panel, is how crazy or weird would you have thought the band with a frontman like Freddie before they got to the arena rock stage? Because Freddie can't not be Freddie. Queen can't not be Queen. Imagine them in a small bar or club. That's just...
Well, his voice, right? The voice will carry it.
Oh, I know, but that, imagine that coming out of, your local pub. Just, that voice, just...
And that's what set them apart. That is why
Exactly.
Queen is Queen.
Yeah.
That is
Yes.
You have
Exactly.
pipes
I
like
think
that,
that's-
you will get noticed.
Yeah,
exactly.
and I can imagine
Just wish
like
it could have been there.
I can imagine a small pub just with like lines of people trying to get in and you know that sort of thing. And I guess that's how they eventually got to Wembley and stuff. Is
Mhm.
just you know
Practice.
having people interested. Yeah.
Crazy thing to see.
A crazy little thing called practice and skills. Jaime,
Yeah.
what would be some of the key tracks for you? What would be some of the key tracks that define this record, or some of your favorite tracks?
Well, you know, you're tempted to go directly to the movie tracks, and it's really interesting because you have a lot of hits from this album, and hits that not only were hits at the time but endured. Definitely a kind of magic. It's interesting. A kind of magic is throughout the film, but you don't focus on it that much. But it became like a staple in late '80s video and music shows. Princess of the Universe, of course, it you know it's spectacular. But my personal favorite is Who Wants to Live Forever. It was used so freaking well in the movie, and it makes you yearn a lot. And you know you can see May discussing, you know, that he wrote it because, you know, he learned how the Highlander would fall in love but outlive his wife or his beloved at the time, and you know how it would hurt. And there was a moment at which, you know, and the interesting thing also about Who Wants to Live Forever is that this was a year before Freddie got diagnosed with AIDS, so it's kind of a, you know, powerful connection to that too. It's you know, it makes me shudder, and sometimes maybe once in a while this eye gets a little wet. I don't know why. It's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Manly tears. Man tears.
Of course.
Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Yeah, a kind of magic is it's not just the, you know, a song that, you know, I know from, I mean, there's like, Queen is an amazing band where I can come up with 20 songs of theirs that gets played on the radio regularly. So they're a known, but like for this later stage, that's something that I do still hear. That's outside of the 70s stuff, and it really has some fantastic stereo effect on the guitar work. It's a well written song. You know, I just really think it's cool that like the stuff that I can get on a little box that I can hold in my hand, people had to like engineer that. So had to be somebody who did that first. And a lot of that tone, like Brian May tone to this day, I could not make that tone. If I had all the money in the world, it would be hard. But Princess of the Universe is like the that is like the second most Queen song after Flash. I mean, it's got everything, you know, it's everything's there. Everybody can go to that song and just listen to it and smile. I mean, it's, even though it really has nothing to do with the movie, lyrically, there, but it's still an awesome song. I really enjoyed the guitar work on Gimme the Prize. There was a really awesome wah solo, going on there that was like, wow, that's like, you know, very, Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix mashed together, only done very, very finely. But yeah, this album is full of really well written songs. Like the piano, like I'm gonna go find sheet music for my wife for Who Wants to Live Forever, just to, you know, and I'll stand behind her with a synthesizer and hit the swells. But
yeah, some fantastic tracks. Patrick, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I'm gonna do the Record Breakers thing before Drew does the Record Breakers thing and talk about One Vision, the opener. The guitar lick that opens that is such a Brian May, like dead simple, just a couple of chords guitar lick, but it sounds like the greatest thing in the universe. because it's Brian May. The guy sounds unlike anyone ever. I've never heard a guitar player sound like Brian May, and it's not just single coils and AC30s. It is really specific pickups and a guitar he built with his dad, played with sixpence pieces. Like, I don't understand it. I can't create it myself, but I love hearing it. It's a really good example of 80s, synth heavy Queen, but it's still got enough guitars to really do it. And I'll touch on one Brett talked about. Give Me the Prize sounds like a lot more like a classic Queen song than anything else on the record. It's way more guitar driven. And that to me is, for me, Queen is that, guitar sort of thing. And it's got, that sort of almost Van Halen-y solo in it, but it's clearly not, Eddie Van Halen two-hand tapping, but Brian May doing what was at the time sort of fresh and new for guitar players, and doing it really well for being a guy who had been, in this band at this point for, 15, 20 years. Those are sort of the two that jump out to me right off. A Kind of Magic has a really good bass line. John Deacon was a good bass player. He is, his presence in the band, being a guy who could carry a song on the bass, allowed Brian May to be Brian May, just ripping, soaring solos and sounding amazing. And every single song has Freddie Mercury singing, which means it's amazing.
Yes.
Because it's Freddie.
Yes, Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, I'm going to do the Record Breakers thing after Pat did the Record Breakers thing. I'm going to start with the beginning track, One Vision. There might be a different song, as I alluded to earlier, that tops Top Gear's list of greatest driving songs of all time. But One Vision, to me, deserves to be right up there. Also, side note, I'm going into these songs knowing that it was about the Highlander. I've never seen the Highlander, so I don't know the connections.
You haven't seen the Highlander.
Boo.
I don't think I've ever seen the movie. I've only ever seen the TV show. I know, for shame. I definitely, at 4:00 today, mind you, recording it's, 8:30, tried to find Highlander somewhere streaming so I could just sit down and have 2 hours of my life. And I couldn't find it anywhere without paying for it, and I ain't about that life. So.
You guys have to understand, it's 1986.
I know, this album is my age.
Yeah, but basically Star Wars is over. So no more lightsabers, no more sword fighting, and we're all like hankering for something like that. And then, and I think the album actually, or the music actually made the movie. I think if the movie was just a sword fighting movie or whatever, it would have not done it. But Queen made it a gigantic hit, in my opinion. So there's a circular connection.
Circularity.
You guys just come over to my house. I think I've got it on Laserdisc. And we can watch it, and halfway through, Drew can flip the Laserdisc over, and we can watch the other half of the movie.
Yes. But yeah, Drew, as you were saying.
As I was saying, Kind of Magic. I don't know if maybe in my past life I was in a production of West Side Story or something, but finger snaps, I'm a sucker for them at the beginning of any song. I'm cool with that. The bass line, like Pat said, is great. It's simple. It's effective. It lets Freddie and Brian really shine through. Freddie does the Freddie thing of great high sustained notes that are just grandiose and huge and great and would sound amazing reverberating off of any arena in any country in the world. And I want to bring up Don't Lose Your Head. Don't Lose Your Head to me is when I think of good 80s sounding synth, that's the kind of thing I want. The Don't Lose Your Head was fantastic for that. And it really really brought up the fact that Queen had their own sound, and that was definite. And you never got away from the Queen sound, and that was great. But they were able to, through the years, take things around them, like any great rock band can do, and let that influence them without letting it change them. And I think that's utterly brilliant and a sign of any great rock musician, is letting letting what's popular, or what's big, or what's happening around you in rock music influence you and not change your underlying core.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some fantastic tracks. And I guess we'll go back around the horn for some last conclusive thoughts. Brett, what would be your conclusion about the album overall?
I mean, when I listen to this album, you know, it's nearing the end of Queen, and it just sort of bums me out. Like, the thing that I take away from this is, like, what would the 90s have been if Freddie Mercury was floating around? What would today be like if Freddie Mercury was still floating around? What, like, the things that were going to come musically that would have changed the way that, like, those guys made music, but instead we got it cut short. You know, this was a good album. I enjoy it. I'll listen to it a bunch. And everybody out there needs to both watch Highlander, but more importantly, listen to this album.
Fix the problem. Fix it. I promise.
Yes. I'll go back to Drew. Going back to kind of, you can continue your point about what would be your conclusion about the album overall.
To me, this is one of those albums it's Queen, and yeah, I was getting on at the end, and that sucks. And the what could have beens are, some great questions to ask, and it's one of those things where all music fans sit and wonder, like, well, what if, like, Freddie would have lived on, or what if the Clash would have gotten back together, or what if, and it's great to dream about, but to have these type of records in the pantheon of, like, the all-time classics, I think is something that's great, and something that, I mean, it's hard to do a definitive realization of an album like this that's just so quintessentially, in my opinion, what Queen is and what they could be, and kind of showed what they could have done given more time. But it's like, it's something to be cliche. It's something to cherish that we got something like this out of what the greatness of Queen was and what the greatness of Freddie Mercury was.
Would you say it's a kind of magic?
It's some kind of magic.
It's
kind
of magic.
It's a kind of.
Kind of. Kind of magic. Patrick,
Magic.
what are your conclusions about the album overall?
So I'm going to step back from the album because we can all agree it's Queen. And I really just want to talk about the band Queen. There's never been a better frontman than Freddie Mercury. Every guitar player ever should sit down and study what Brian May did, because he is the best guitar tone ever, and he played amazing riffs throughout his whole career. Roger Taylor was a hell of a drummer. John Deacon held down the goddamn fort for the band. I'm not sure there are many bands that lasted as long as Queen that are as good as Queen. Like, you look at like Led Zeppelin didn't last as long as Queen, and Queen would probably still be around if not for AIDS being a big fuckhead. So AIDS, you're a fuckhead.
Yeah.
And it's one of those situations where you know, they're a band that at no point in their career were ever bad. They were just different. They evolved. They changed with the times. They tried new shit. They experimented. And this album is them trying new shit. And it's not bad. It's kind of good. There's good songs here. There's good writing here. They're excellent musicians. Go listen to everything Queen ever recorded is kind of my answer. They're a band that like, they need no introduction. However much praise you heap on them is not enough. They're one of the greatest ever.
Yeah. Jaime,
Yes.
you get the last word. What would be your conclusions about this album overall?
This album, in my opinion, proved that Queen had a hell of a lot more to give, and it defined the generation. It changed the rest of that decade, and it was to me personally, and I think to a lot of people that saw it, it became the soundtrack to our lives in the background everywhere. We it's strange, and very few people are like Freddie in that as time goes by, we recognize more and more how great they are. At the time, we knew they were good, but we didn't realize how freaking incredible he was. And and Brian May, my God, and he's an astrophysicist, which is pretty interesting. So it's a kind of magic, in my opinion, is a little bit of everything. It's very 80s, but it's also very, very Queen. And because of that, it is one of my favorite pieces of music in all of existence. I don't think I can say anything better.
Yes. And that pretty much sums up all of our thoughts, I guess. And we're, kind of concludes everything as far as our thoughts. Now we get to our main event of the evening, what everybody's waiting for. Of course, our haiku reviews. Really the star of our show is our haiku reviews. Who do I start with now? Let's go with Patrick. What is your haiku?
Legendary band, perhaps the greatest of all, Queen was perfection.
Brett, what is your haiku?
Well-crafted album, as the end came near for Queen. A kind of magic.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go in the middle. My haiku. Arena rock gods, though not really at their prime, still pretty damn good. Drew, what is your haiku?
Petey loves being in the middle of a bunch of dudes. Arena rock that I can fully get behind with a raised fist.
Mm-hmm. And Jaime.
Oh my God. Okay. Here we go. Here we are. That's 5. We are born to be kings. Give me the prize, Freddie.
Yes.
Yes. And I have it in Spanish as well if you're interested.
Yes, go for it. Yes, we are interested.
Yes,
we couldn't be more interested.
In a French accent.
Yes.
Okay. Aquí estamos, nacidos para reinar. Dame el premio, Freddie. There we go.
Kaz, eat your heart out.
Yes.
And I think the syllables are fine in both of them. Well, more or less. Here we are.
Close enough.
It's not a hello traditional poetry form.
Here. Well,
yeah, whatever. Of course, that was Queen. You can play along at home. You can listen along to Queen. We all recommend you listen to this album many times by going to our Spotify playlist. Check it out on there. It should be on there already preloaded if you're playing Record Breakers, the home game. Listen to it there. Also on that playlist is going to be next week's album, which is my album. And my album is going to be very interesting. It's going to be Mariachi El Bronx. Their album Mariachi El Bronx, specifically the one that just came out, not the one that came out before it or the first one that came out, but the Mariachi El Bronx that just came out.
Just call it Mariachi El Bronx 3.
2014.
It's the third one, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The third one.
Mariachi El Bronx 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
From 2014, and it looks like a magic eye.
Yes.
Oh! Just an aside from the show. I made a reference that when you look at this album, you see a schooner, and Petey had the perfect response.
Yes, the only response. And I'll leave that to your imagination. But that's it. Until well, of course, you can find us all over the internet. Patrick is at the Swagger. Brett is at HIBBARD, HIBBITYBIBBARD. Drew is at X4X. I'm at PD Rave. Jaime is at Tensorguy. Jaime, do you have anything you want to plug really quick?
Yes, but this is a family show.
So until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.